Now listen, I want you to understand something that most people get completely wrong. When an avoidant person won't stop calling and texting you, everybody around you starts saying the same thing. See, they miss you. See, they want you back. But I need you to look deeper than that. Silence doesn't always mean detachment. Now listen carefully, because this right here confuses a lot of people and causes more heartbreak than almost anything else. When somebody becomes quiet, pulls away, takes longer to answer, or disappears for a while, most people immediately assume one thing: they don't care anymore. But life is not always that simple, especially when you're dealing with someone who has avoidant tendencies. See, most people think closeness should automatically create more closeness. They think if two people care about each other, communication should increase, attention should increase, and emotional expression should become easier. But for some people, the opposite happens. The more feelings become real, the more uncomfortable they become. And if you don't understand that, you start making decisions based on fear instead of reality. You start texting more, calling more, asking more questions, trying harder, showing more affection, thinking that if you just love harder, they'll come closer. But sometimes every extra step forward you take becomes another reason for them to step backward. That doesn't mean you did something wrong. It means you're expecting someone to respond emotionally the same way you do. Avoidant people often process emotions privately. They don't always run toward connection when things feel intense. Sometimes they retreat to understand what they feel. Now here's where people get trapped. The silence begins. And instead of observing calmly, they create a story. They found someone else. They lost interest. I'm not enough. They never cared. And because they believe that story, they react emotionally. But reacting emotionally to silence usually creates more distance, because now the interaction becomes pressure instead of connection. Think about this. If somebody already struggles with feeling emotionally crowded, and suddenly their phone becomes 20 missed calls, 10 emotional paragraphs, demands for reassurance, and constant checking, what do you think happens? Most of the time they don't feel closer, they feel overwhelmed. And overwhelmed people rarely move toward intimacy. They move away. Now, I'm not saying silence should be accepted forever. No healthy relationships still require communication, effort, and respect. But there's a difference between silence as emotional processing and silence as emotional neglect. That's where maturity comes in. Instead of instantly assuming the worst, you learn to observe patterns. When they reconnect, do they show care? Do they explain? Do they make effort, or do they only appear when convenient? That matters, because silence by itself doesn't tell the whole story. People can be quiet for many reasons: fear, stress, confusion, overthinking, emotional overload, past experiences. And if you attach your value to someone else's communication speed, you'll spend your whole life feeling rejected. Your peace cannot depend on somebody else's phone habits. When someone becomes quiet, your job is not to chase. Your job is not to force clarity. Your job is to remain steady, continue your life, protect your energy, stay open without becoming desperate. Because here's something powerful. People often reveal more during distance than during closeness. When you stop forcing interaction, people show you whether they genuinely want connection. They call, they text, they return, or they don't. And either way, you receive information, not punishment, information. So don't treat every silence like abandonment. Sometimes silence is confusion. Sometimes silence is fear. Sometimes silence is space. And sometimes silence is an answer. Your wisdom is learning the difference. Avoidant people pull away to feel safe, not always to leave. Now, this is something a lot of people misunderstand, because when somebody pulls away, the first reaction is usually panic. You notice the messages getting shorter, the calls become less frequent, the energy changes, and immediately your mind starts telling you a story. They're losing feelings. They don't want me anymore. They're preparing to leave. But with avoidant personalities, distance does not always mean rejection. Sometimes distance is protection. See, people who lean avoidant often learn somewhere in life that closeness comes with pressure, expectations, disappointment, losing themselves. So when emotions become strong, they don't always move closer. Sometimes they move backward. Not because they don't feel, because they feel too much. And that's the confusing part. Most people believe somebody who cares should become more expressive. But avoidant people can become quieter exactly when emotions become real. That's why you can have moments where everything feels amazing and then suddenly they become distant. Nothing obvious happened, no argument, no major problem, yet something shifted. And what shifted wasn't necessarily their feelings. What shifted was their comfort level. Contention started feeling serious. Expectations started feeling visible. And their instinct became space. Now here's where people accidentally make things harder. They interpret withdrawal as abandonment. So they start chasing more texts, more emotional conversations, more questions, more reassurance seeking, and every action comes from fear. But to somebody who already feels crowded emotionally, that pressure can feel overwhelming. Then they pull away more, not because they hate attention, because they're trying to breathe. Think about holding sand in your hand. If you hold it gently, it stays. If you squeeze harder every second because you're scared of losing it, it slips away faster. That doesn't mean become unavailable. That doesn't mean pretend not to care. It means understand that not everybody reconnects through intensity. Some reconnect through safety. And safety doesn't mean disappearing forever. Healthy distance still includes communication. Healthy space still includes respect. There's a difference between someone saying, I need a little time, and someone repeatedly leaving you confused while expecting unlimited patience. Don't ignore that difference, because understanding avoidant behavior should never become an excuse to accept inconsistency forever. Your feelings matter too. What matters is not whether somebody occasionally pulls away. What matters is what they do afterward. Do they return with effort? Do they communicate better? Do they take responsibility? Do they make room for your needs too? That's what creates trust. And here's something powerful. When somebody pulls away, you don't always have to chase to prove your value. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is remain calm, continue your routine, stay connected to your own goals, let them experience your absence instead of your panic. Because people often reconnect when they realize connection doesn't equal losing freedom, when they realize they're wanted but not controlled, cared for but not managed, loved but not chased. And if somebody never comes back, that tells you something too. Because real connection eventually moves toward clarity. You cannot build a relationship entirely on waiting. So understand the pattern without losing yourself inside it. Avoidant people may pull away to feel safe, but relationships still require showing up. And the right person won't make you earn every moment of closeness by abandoning yourself in the process. Distance can create unexpected attraction. Now, this part surprises people because it sounds backwards. Most people grow up believing that the more attention you give somebody, the more attached they become. They think constant availability creates stronger feelings. They believe being present every second proves love. But relationships do not always work that way. Sometimes too much availability removes appreciation. Sometimes constant access removes curiosity. And sometimes distance creates space for people to actually feel what your presence meant. Now understand something. Distance is not a game. This is not about ignoring people. This is not about pretending to be unavailable. This is about understanding human nature. When someone always knows you'll answer instantly, always wait, always check in first, always adjust your schedule, always stay emotionally available, no matter how little effort they give, they can begin to experience your presence as guaranteed, and people often notice value more clearly when they experience contrast. That doesn't mean they stop caring. It means they stop noticing. Think about something simple. You rarely think about electricity until the lights go out. You rarely think about quiet until noise appears. You rarely realize how comforting someone's energy was until it's no longer constantly available. That's where distance changes things, especially with avoidant people, because avoidant people often process emotions differently. When closeness feels intense, they can become overwhelmed, but once space appears, pressure disappears. And without pressure, emotions become easier to access. Suddenly they start remembering conversations. They replay moments. They notice your absence, not because you manipulated them, because their nervous system finally feels calm enough to reflect. And that's why some people disappear and then come back texting, calling, checking in, acting curious again. The mistake people make is believing the return happened because they chased harder. No, many times the return happened because they stopped chasing, because they gave space, because they returned attention back to themselves. And here's where things become powerful. When your world becomes bigger than one person, your energy changes. You stop monitoring response times, you stop rereading messages, you stop building your mood around somebody's attention. You start investing in yourself, your goals, your friendships, your health, your future, and something interesting happens. People feel that shift. Confidence attracts, purpose attracts, peace attracts. Not because people love being ignored, But because healthy energy feels different, you become somebody people want to join instead of somebody trying to hold them in place. Now be careful. Distance alone doesn't create attraction. If somebody never valued the connection, distance won't magically create feelings. Space reveals. It doesn't manufacture. If the foundation was there, space may allow feelings to surface. If the foundation wasn't there, space reveals that too. That's why your goal should never be making somebody miss you. Your goal should be becoming somebody who doesn't abandon themselves while waiting to be chosen. Because when you stop chasing, one of two things happens. Either they move towards you, or you realize you were carrying the connection alone. Both outcomes are valuable. And if somebody suddenly returns because they notice your distance, don't confuse attention with transformation. Pay attention to actions. Do they show consistency? Do they create stability? Do they communicate better? Because attraction can restart a conversation, but effort is what builds a relationship. Distance can open eyes, but character determines what happens after somebody comes back. And when you understand that, you stop using distance to control people and start using it to reconnect with yourself. Your energy changes the dynamic. Now, this is the part people underestimate the most because they think attraction is about saying the right words, sending the perfect message, or finding some secret way to make somebody realize your value. But energy changes more than explanation ever will. You can talk for hours trying to convince somebody to choose you. You can explain your intentions, show loyalty, show patience, show effort, and still feel like nothing changes. Then one day you stop pushing, start focusing on yourself, and suddenly the same person begins texting more, calling more, noticing more, and you wonder what happened. Your energy changed. See, people respond to energy even when they cannot explain it. Not magic, not manipulation. Energy is the emotional experience people have around you. When your energy becomes fear, people feel pressure. When your energy becomes desperation, people feel responsibility. When your energy becomes anxiety, people feel expectation. And when someone already struggles with closeness, that pressure becomes heavy. Think about how different these two situations feel. One person says, "Please don't leave me. Tell me what's wrong. Why are you changing? I need answers." Another person says, "I care about you, but I also care about myself. If you need space, take it. I'm continuing my life." Same feelings, different energy. One is holding tightly, one is standing firmly. People feel the difference, and here's the truth nobody likes hearing. When your entire emotional state depends on another person's response, they can feel it, not because they're bad, because emotional dependence creates invisible pressure. Every delayed reply becomes emotional labor. Every moment of distance becomes guilt. Every conversation starts carrying expectation. That's exhausting. Now understand this clearly. Wanting love is normal. Wanting reassurance is human. But needing someone to constantly regulate your worth creates imbalance. Because then relationships stop being connection and start becoming rescue missions. And healthy people usually move away from being responsible for somebody else's identity. That's why changing your energy matters, not to attract somebody back, to reconnect with yourself. When you start waking up and building your day without waiting for messages, when you stop checking your phone every 10 minutes, when you start creating goals again, when you laugh again, when you remember who you were before somebody became your entire focus, you become emotionally lighter. And people notice, especially avoidant people, because suddenly the relationship doesn't feel like pressure anymore. It feels like choice. They don't feel trapped. They don't feel watched. They don't feel responsible for your emotional weather. And ironically, that often makes connection easier. Now don't misunderstand this. Changing your energy doesn't mean acting cold. It doesn't mean becoming unavailable. It doesn't mean pretending you don't care. Real confidence isn't pretending to need nobody. Real confidence is caring deeply without losing yourself. You answer messages without obsession. You show affection without overextending. You stay open without abandoning your standards. And if somebody moves closer, great. If they move away, you remain whole. That's powerful because the strongest energy in relationships is not chasing. It's self-respect. It's knowing that your value doesn't rise and fall based on somebody's mood. It's understanding that somebody choosing you should add to your life, not become your life. And when that shift happens inside you, conversations change. The pressure disappears. The tension softens. The connection becomes more natural. Not because you became less loving, but because you stopped making love feel like a burden to carry. Your energy changes the dynamic because people can feel when you're trying to hold on to them. And they can also feel when you've learned how to stand on your own. Chasing removes mystery and value. Now, before you misunderstand this, I'm not talking about playing games. I'm not talking about acting unavailable. I'm not talking about ignoring messages just to create drama. That's not confidence. That's strategy. And strategy can get attention, but it doesn't build real connection. What I'm talking about is something deeper. When you constantly chase somebody, you accidentally communicate something you never intended to say. You stop saying, I care about you, and you start saying, I don't believe I'll be okay unless you choose me. People can feel the difference. See, there's nothing wrong with effort. Effort is beautiful. Effort says, I value this. But chasing is different. Chasing begins when effort becomes one-sided, when your thoughts revolve around their replies, when every day becomes waiting, when your mood changes based on their attention, when you're carrying the entire relationship by yourself. That's when attraction starts changing, because attraction isn't built only through availability. It's built through emotional balance. Think about this. If somebody never has to wonder what you're doing because you always update them, if they never have to miss you because you're always there, if they never have to initiate because you always reach out first, if they never have to make effort because you already did everything, eventually the relationship stops feeling mutual. One person becomes the source, the other becomes the receiver, and people rarely protect what they never had to earn. Now, this doesn't mean love should be difficult. Healthy love is not about making somebody work endlessly. But healthy love includes movement from both sides, curiosity from both sides, investment from both sides. And when you chase too much, you remove opportunities for the other person to move towards you. You answer every silence. You fix every problem. You restart every conversation. You close every distance. So they never experience your absence, never notice your value, never discover whether they actually want to show up. Especially with avoidant people, chasing often creates the opposite effect, because every attempt to pull them closer can feel like pressure, and pressure creates resistance. Then people panic. They think, maybe I need to try harder. No, sometimes trying harder becomes the thing creating distance, because attraction needs room to breathe, room for someone to think, room to choose, room to wonder, room to act. Now here's something powerful. The moment you stop chasing, you start observing. Instead of asking, how do I make them want me? You ask, what are they showing me? That changes everything, because now you're paying attention to reality instead of potential. Do they call? Do they initiate? Do they stay curious? Do they make effort? Do they show consistency? Those answers matter. And if they don't move towards you, that information matters too, because your value does not increase when somebody finally notices you. Your value existed before they looked. That's why stepping back isn't punishment. It's clarity. It allows relationships to reveal themselves. If somebody wants connection, they create it. If somebody values you, they show it. If somebody misses you, they move. And if they don't, you stop wasting years trying to earn what should have been freely offered. You know what becomes attractive? A person who cares deeply but still has a full life. A person who loves but doesn't beg. A person who gives but also receives. A person who can walk away without anger because they know their worth. Their energy creates respect, not because people love distance, but because people recognize somebody who is not abandoning themselves for approval. So stop measuring love by how hard you chase. Measure it by how naturally both people keep choosing each other. Because the moment you stop running after people, you finally get to see who was willing to walk beside you. When you focus on yourself, they often return with attention. Now, this is one of those things people notice but rarely understand. You've probably seen it happen before. You spend weeks trying, sending messages, checking in, giving attention, making excuses, trying to fix things, trying to show them your value, and nothing changes. Then one day, something inside you shifts. You stop forcing, you stop waiting, you stop making somebody the center of your world. You start sleeping better, working more, lawing more, taking care of yourself, living again. And suddenly, your phone rings, a text appears, a random message, a check-in. And the question becomes, why now? People immediately think it's some secret technique. They think self-focus magically attracts people. But the truth is usually simpler than that. When you focus entirely on somebody else, your energy starts asking for something: validation, certainty, attention by perception to feel okay. People can feel that, not because they're trying to judge you, because emotional pressure changes interactions. When every conversation feels like it carries expectations, people become careful. sometimes distant, especially avoidant personalities. But when you turn your attention back toward yourself, something changes. You stop needing every interaction to mean something. You stop searching for hidden messages. You stop treating silence like rejection, and people feel the difference. Now your conversations become lighter. Your energy becomes calmer. You become present instead of attached. And ironically, that often makes people curious again, because there's a big difference between somebody who has a full life and invites you into it, and somebody who waits emotionally at the door hoping you'll stay. One feels free, one feels heavy. Now hear me clearly, focusing on yourself is not a strategy to get somebody back. Because if your self-growth only exists to get attention, you're still emotionally centered on them. You're just doing it differently. Real self-focus means your life matters whether somebody texts you or not. You wake up and build your day anyway. You create goals anyway. You take care of your peace anyway. You enjoy your life anyway. And that energy creates something powerful. You stop chasing outcomes. That's when people often notice, because humans naturally notice change. If somebody expected unlimited access to your attention and suddenly they realize you're not waiting anymore, curiosity appears, questions appear, interest appears, not because you became unavailable, because you became unavailable for emotional dependence. And now they have space to move towards you. But this is where people make another mistake. Someone comes back, calls, texts, shows attention, and immediately they assume everything changed. Slow down. Attention is not always intention. Sometimes people return because they miss comfort. Sometimes they return because they miss certainty. Sometimes they return because they notice your absence. That doesn't automatically mean they're ready to show up differently. Watch actions. Did communication improve? Did consistency improve? Did effort improve? Because attention feels exciting, but consistency builds trust, and trust matters more. Here's the beautiful part though. When you truly focus on yourself, you stop being afraid of either outcome. If they come back, you can evaluate clearly. If they don't come back, your life still moves forward. That's freedom. You stop seeing relationships as rescue. You stop seeing attention as proof of worth. You stop treating love like something that must be earned through exhaustion. You become somebody who shares life instead of somebody who waits for life to begin. And people feel that confidence without arrogance, warmth without desperation, presence without pressure. That energy changes relationships. Not because people suddenly realize your value was already there. You finally stop forgetting it. And when you stop making somebody your entire world, something unexpected happens. The people who truly want to be part of your life start showing you with actions instead of promises.